Hi, everyone. Thank you all very much for coming. My name is Kevin Jordan. I ran several seasons for Coach Cohen and was captain of the 2012 cross country team. Very thankful for the opportunity to share this project in person with you all. I want to thank the library director, Lisa Michelli, and the head of adult services, Chris Carney, for helping me and sponsoring the event. Along with many other athletes, Coach Cohen has made a huge impact on my life during and after high school. I mostly want to let the video speak for itself, but I also wanted to add context for those that may not know him. He coached cross country and track and field for over 30 years, and after being asked by his athletes, he started the co-ed indoor track team. So for most of his career, he coached fall, winter, and spring. And if that wasn't enough, he also worked at Green Mountain Running Camp as director and lead instructor. He has coaching certifications from several organizations, including USA Track and Field, and twice was named Coach of the Year by the Connecticut Coaches Association. Additionally, he was a finalist for a National Coaching Award in 2017, selected from all of the cross-country coaches in New England and New York State. Before we start, I want to remind everyone that there will be a Q&A, and you have the opportunity to ask questions to Coach, your own questions. And I also want to just remind people if they could silence their cell phones if they haven't already. And I will do the same. So, thank you very much.
I started running in the 80s. Did not do any running, didn't do any sports in high school. I worked, I had a job uh, in high school, and I was actually working with um, a student who had a drug problem, and I was asking her to go a day without using, a day without smoking, a day with, whatever the case might have been. And she finally looked at me at one time, and I was heavy then. And she goes, "Oh, that's fine. Why don't you go a day without food?" Um, so I lost weight. And during that process, I started running. And I thought, well, I'd go out and do an easy mile, after dinner, which is the way I started. And I could not get to the end of my 125-foot driveway at the time. But it was a half mile around my block. And I just tried to run a little bit further every day. Doing this in the 80s and the early 90s, there were no cell phones. So it was no one could get a hold of me. No one could bother me at that point. I was alone in my thoughts, and I enjoyed that solitude, if you will.
So what was running culture like back then?
Well, runners were not respected. You didn't belong on the roads. The roads belonged to cars. I had an instance where somebody, a passenger in the car, opened the passenger door to see if they could hit me as the car went by. Um, and it's not like I was running out in the middle of the road. Back then, things were also a lot more casual. Races were very informal. One of the famous ones was a cookie race where, maybe the top three places would get cookies. And then those people usually shared the cookies with everybody who was there. So, really an informal, but it was a different time.
So, how did you develop an interest in coaching?
I have two very good friends of mine who are coaches. One of them is Dennis Lobo, Rebecca Lobo's dad, if you know anything about Connecticut basketball and the WNBA, and Mark Aquata, uh, who often helped us out at GHI and at sometimes at Stratton Brook. Mark was teaching with my wife. He's a phys ed teacher, and he was coaching cross country and outdoor track in Granby. I lived in Granby. My wife came home and said, "You're going to get a call from Mark. Um, they're looking for a track coach, and he thinks you'd be a good addition." So I'm a distance runner. What do I know about coaching track? Anyway, did get the call, subsequently agreed and thought I was going to be coaching distance runners. No, that was Mark coaching distance runners. They wanted me to be a jumps coach. Long jump, triple jump, high jump. Mark, I don't know anything about jumping. And Mark looked at me and he said, "Yeah, but I know you." He goes, "You'll know more than most coaches will within a month." And so I started coaching Granby track. Oh, by the way, the first week they told me I was also coaching pole vault, and I knew nothing about pole vault.
So, what were you using to learn back then?
Books. I still have some of my original track manuals over there. Going back and reading articles on microfiche, if you even know what that is. Microfiche is like an index card with photograph miniature pages that were in magazines. So Sports Illustrated would have a number of articles on 1976 Olympic jumpers and analyzing their styles, and then a critique by other people of those styles. And so I would read and I would try to pick up ideas. Now with the internet, it's good and bad because everything is out there. Nothing has been really edited in terms of what research says versus what somebody's opinion is. But both of them look as professional, you know. So it's a lot more weeding that you have to do now. But the availability of critical material and research is unlimited.
You mentioned this to me before, but can you talk a little bit more about your habit of self-evaluation after practices?
Let me say, I learned this when I was teaching. I would always sit down um, certainly at the end of a day, and I would think about what went well and what didn't go well during the day. Um, Oftentimes had multiple of the same class. Why did it go well in period 3 and period 5? I was doing the same thing, and it felt like I was doing it the same way, yet it was not as good an experience from my point of view and from the feedback I was getting in class. That carried over when I started coaching.
What was it like assembling and managing a group of coaches for the track team?
One of the hardest things to do, I think, is to evaluate if somebody would make a good coach. I'm very fortunate in that the people that worked with me never for me, with me, and for the team, work with the team, had the right attitude. I had people on staff at times that I tried to encourage to do more, to learn more. I started initially bringing coaches to coaches workshops in Massachusetts, or in inside the state, and pay for it out of my own pocket. Um, but get them up there, get them excited about learning new things. Uh, Always had in my coach's library um, books on techniques, videotapes. Um, Later on, CD discs, uh, stuff that I would purchase and give to go. Hey, take a look at this. Tell me what you think about it. What do you think about moving to the spin technique in discus as opposed to the glide? Um, what do you think about this technique for the long jump? Do you think we ought to be emphasizing the hang as opposed to the step in the air technique? Things that give them stuff to think about, to evaluate, and to eventually use with kids. So my goal was always to find people who could fill holes, and if I couldn't find someone to fill a hole, that meant that's what I was coaching. And so I brought somebody on who would coach distance, even though that's sort of my love. And what I couldn't find was a pole vault javelin coach. Nobody knows how to throw a javelin. Um, and so I became a javelin pole vault coach.
So, did you have a preference in coaching cross country or track?
If you said to me which sport that I like coaching, from the standpoint of dealing with one personality type, cross country was easier. A lot more challenges in coaching track that I enjoyed. Talk about being a juggler with five objects in the air at all times. That was really true. And the year I took over both the boys and the girls team, and we had in excess of 200 kids, spreadsheets getting ready for meets were horrible. They were 200 lines long in my worksheet, in my Excel worksheet, 17 rows across. And you always had to make sure that nobody was in more events than were allowed, that they were all in their event they wanted to be in, plus whatever events we needed them to do. So very challenging, very time consuming. Track, more so, I think, than cross country, is a black hole for time. It doesn't matter how much time you have, it's never enough from an organizational and learning perspective.
What was it like organizing large events like the Greater Hartford and Strattonbrook Invitational?
GHI, when you have 1,500 to 2,000 entry athletes in a meet, it's huge. It's complex. The planning for GHI next year started 7 days after the completion of the GHI this year. I had timelines worked out where certain things had to be done by certain times. By mid-July, the medals and plaques were all ordered for Stratton Brook. And I got a call 2 weeks before Stratton Brook. They never put the order in with the company making the medals, and they couldn't possibly get them to me on time. I felt like a failure. And it wasn't it wasn't because of me. But stuff happens, I told people, coaches weren't upset. I was annoyed because that's important to me. If you're giving out 20 JV medals in the JV race, then that kid deserves the medal that day, deserves to be honored. And now, yeah, you could call the kid up, but you couldn't give anything to the kid. Anyway, um, very annoying.
What effect did your science background have on your coaching?
First, let me say, I think that I learned more biology once I became a coach than I certainly knew in terms of anatomy and physiology and training. But having a science background the way I coached made a huge difference. It's a huge advantage. I mean, I used to get 5 or 6 newsletters a week on training or physiology or nutrition, variety of different topics. And I could look at those with the insight of my biology background. How can I adapt the training that they're doing with top level college runners who are 21, 22, 23? How can I adapt that to a 15-year-old body, 16-year-old body? Maybe if you're lucky, you've still got one of those guys at 18 years old. It's an entirely different ballgame. So what do I need to do? Clearly, it became clear to me. I used to teach a coaching class at Green Mountain Running Camp for cross country coaches. I would say, what's your job as a coach? And inevitably, you'd get some form of, well, my job is to train kids to run faster or to train kids to run. So, how do you do that? And I'd finally look at them and say, what you're doing is you're training power systems in the body. Understand what your job is. And inevitably, they told me the least successful part of the course was talking about the biology. I said, but now you know why, when you're doing X, you get a benefit. Not just do X because my coach did X. And because that's the way a lot of coaches coach. They coach the way they were coached, but they don't know why. And I would tell kids I coach, if you don't know why we're doing something, you ask me. And if I can't tell you, don't do it. My coaching was all about putting myself out of a job. I wanted kids to know what they needed to do to coach themselves so they didn't need me. Because only a tiny fraction of them were going to get coaching in college. Most of them, weren't going to be athletes in college. And what is it? Less than 1% go on from even those who were in college to go beyond that.
What did you want your athletes to learn through running or participating in athletics?
The biggest thing I think an athlete can learn, and what I certainly wanted my athletes to learn, was more about themselves. What am I capable of? Am I capable of more than I think that I am? And the answer to that question for almost everyone is yes. I can't say it's got to be a blanket on 100%. But we all tend to underestimate our own abilities. And I don't really care what venue we're talking about this now. We also tend to feed ourselves negatives. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not thin enough. I'm not muscular enough. I'm not strong enough. And we limit our own ability. That self-fulfilling prophecy, as it is, becomes true. The old expression of if you think you can and you think you can't, you're probably right. It's very true. I had the most difficult time with athletes on the team that literally did not want someone to do better because they thought somehow that made them worse. And it's simply not true, because you should never be comparing yourself to anybody else on the team, only yourself. When you should be working together, that should be a synergism. A team should always be a synergism. So I think athletics is a key to learning how to work with other people, learning how to take direction, learning how to accept responsibility, learning consistency, because that to me is the key to becoming a good athlete, is consistent work. It's not going out and doing a hell of a workout one day and taking the next 2 days off and become a couch potato. Those are the lifelong lessons. That's the important stuff. You know, it's funny, Kevin, that if you ask me what my record was, I cannot tell you. I can go look it up because I had to fill it out on paperwork at times. I can tell you the year we won the state open in cross country. I know we won the state class championship 3 times in a row because all the articles talked about the three-peat. I can't tell you how many conference champions we had, state champions we had, state team championships we had. How many seasons did we go undefeated? Not important to me. It was to some people. There are some coaches who know that. Not to me. Because that's not the important aspect of, to me, why we have sports in school.
I asked a few people if they had any questions for you, and Tom wanted me to ask you to explain 2 things that you had commonly told us. One of them was why wet leaves could be as slippery as ice.
Yep. Okay, wet leaves. All right. You run across country in the autumn, leaves fall, leaves get wet. What grows between them is called slime mold. And if you step on it, that top leaf, you're going to slide. All right. And so my point was, you always want to be on the midfoot. You don't want to land on your heels, because if your foot slips and you're on your midfoot, you go to your heel. If you're on your heel, you go to your butt. So slime mold is very real, and leaves do get as slippery as ice. Ice is irregular on the surface, okay? Because stuff gets caught in it. It's not, ice frequently isn't all that slippery, especially if you're wearing spikes, okay? But you get a pile of leaves this thick and you're wearing what, 3/16 inch spikes, even a 1/2 inch spike, you're not going through the whole pile and into the ground.
He also wanted me to ask you about your heart rate not rising when you go up a hill and push the downhill.
It will actually go down. Yes, and that's supported by medical research. You can push. You go up a hill, and you push over the hill. You crest the hill. You don't rest on the hill. Okay, you crest the hill and push on the downhill. Almost no matter how hard you push going down the hill, your heart rate will go down because you've been fighting gravity all the way up. All right. So the heart's already pumping, it's pumping an adequate supply, and now you're going faster going down the hill. The thing you got to worry about is overstriding. For a while, we used to use heart rate monitors, and the guys would see that. They would go up mother, and their heart rates would skyrocket. And when you get to the end of mother, it's flat, and then you'd go down double choppers, and their heart rate would go down no matter how hard they push going down that hill. So it works.
What do you think are some of the most important qualities of a good coach?
Willingness to learn, willingness to evaluate the way you've done things and be willing to change. Um, like kids, like working with kids, as frustrating as they can be at times. Um, willingness to change is important. I've had some very complimentary people in my life. And I remember a couple of my athletes once asking me, when did I know I knew it all? And I said, I'll let you know when it happens. Um, when I thought that I knew it all is when I started really learning what I didn't know. Uh, Stuff changes. You, I would often hear my older athletes come back, after 10 years. Wow, you're so much easier on them than you were on. No, I'm not. I am, but different. Yeah, it's different. Um, I was stupid when you when you were here. So
Can you think of something that you learned from your athletes?
um, don't try to create perfection. Kobe was one of those kids I had to hold back because he always wanted to do too much. And he could do a really tough workout, a killer workout, 48 hours. He's totally recovered, ready to go. And I remember before the cross country class championships, we were at Wickham on Tuesday, doing a workout. And he had a great workout, but we had to cut it short for some reason. And I don't remember why, but he did a great workout. And I said, if I could just do a little bit more with him, I really think he has the ability to be all state. I was sure top 10 in the race. But I didn't, and I don't remember the specifics, but I didn't get something accomplished in that workout on Tuesday. And I said, you know what? He's always recovered in 48 hours. And on Thursday, we did something, and he didn't recover on Saturday. And he finished maybe 34th or something. And that's on me. And I was trying to get that perfect peak. And I learned that day, on that Saturday, that there is no perfection. Just aim for excellence and let the chips fall where they may. And I've learned a lot from kids. You sometimes something you say makes a huge difference. Up at camp, I used to try to get some time with each of my athletes who went to camp and be able to sit down and have a conversation with them. And I can remember a conversation with this one gentleman on the team who said to me, "I want to be a top runner." And I looked at him and I said, "So do you think you deserve to be a top runner?" I found out years later that that made a huge difference in his life. That he actually thought about that and said, "Yeah, I do. I do deserve it." He became an award-winning distance runner, went to one of the service academies, West Point specifically, later became a ranger in the Army. And that, just that question, that yes, he deserved that. He put it, and I said it to him knowing that he did, always working hard, always being the first one to volunteer. Okay. And I just wanted to know if he knew it. And that night he didn't know it, but he did think about it, and it made a difference. Hopefully my athletes learned more than how to run, with me. So.
Q&A?
No, leave us in the dark.
Yeah. Does anyone have a question? Otherwise, I can start us off. Here, maybe I'll just.
Okay. Coach, just a question, not necessarily, I guess, regarding your athletic career, but how did it feel to have the camera or the spotlight focused on you rather than you putting the spotlight, I'm assuming, on all of your athletes?
Uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable. I'm amazed that there are this many people who are at all interested. And I don't mean to be self-effacing. It's just, it's not about me. One of the things that is interesting, I've met a lot of coaches, and I'm always surprised when one of the first thing a coach tells you is their record. And then usually that's followed by a statement like, "I've won X number of championships." I didn't win a damn thing in 35 years of coaching. You put me on a cross-country team, we're losing. It's not about, it's never been about me.
over the years, hopefully I've made a difference. The lessons that kids learn are important. The lessons that they learn early on are also very inexpensive. Screw up in high school, do something wrong in high school, yeah, your parents are going to be upset. Maybe you're going to piss off a friend. And it temporarily is going to hurt. That lesson learned when you're 25 is much more expensive. So I have standards. And it's probably the reason I'm not coaching today. As much as, I loved coaching, it was a time for me to leave. So I don't know if I've answered your question completely or not. I'm rambling, I'm sorry.
Are you still running yourself?
No, in the 80s I ran marathons, and I found out that I had some congenital malformation of cartilage that caused abnormal knee wear. So right now I'm hoping to outlast anything, so I'm not looking at knee replacements. I walk on my treadmill. If I get too aggressive on my treadmill, I have to take a week off and let the swelling go down. But other than that, I'm not running any longer. Biggest common injuries amongst students, high school students, shin splints, clearly. One of the guys sitting here, Chandler Ives, that is now a physical doctor of physical therapy, will tell you that most of those shin splints are probably due to muscle imbalances. Also the fact that kids walk around in their shoes all the time, wear the shoes, and the way you wear shoes when you're walking is different than the way you wear WEAR shoes when you run. So if you're running in shoes, that's all you do in them, is my belief. You want to have stuff you can kick on around the house or walking, that sort of thing. But muscle imbalances are difficult. Those are the big ones. Pulled muscle, working on the track. Don't be a hurdler unless you want, skin abrasions on your legs. I don't think, thinking back over the years, I don't think we've had a serious injury to any of my athletes.
Stretching must help.
Proper stretching helps, and stretching at the right time. So, want to come up and take this? Let's see. We did have a broken nose. It was a pole vaulter who knocked the pole off, I think, at 13 feet, and looked up as the pole came down and hit the top of the nose as it hit him and broke it. That's the biggest injury that I can think of offhand.
So I have a question about, as an athlete, I ran with Coach Cohen. And I was speaking with one of my teammates who I competed in college, and my teammate in high school, he competed in college as well. And we both agreed that there were maybe 3 or 4 workouts where we were pushed to our absolute limit, and that would happen every year in college, where we were really pushed to our limit, and they were about as hard as the workouts that we would have on a random Thursday with you. You pushed your athletes to the edge in workouts many times this season, and you had spreadsheets and you seemed to figure it all out. What was the point of pushing us that hard? And should I be doing this now that I'm in my 30s? Yeah.
Well, first of all, you know that my philosophy of coaching is effort-based. So there are times when you need to push yourself to what you think is your limit, okay? That 100% effort that you gave in September was not 100% when it was October. And what you thought was 100% in October didn't come close to what you ran in the state meet, Joel, in the 4x8 that still set the state record. If you can't do it in practice, you're never going to be able to do it in competition. The feeling of exerting to 100%. In competition, you've got other things working for you like adrenaline. You've got the contest itself, so that your effort will be greater in competition. But getting to the point where you can challenge what you think is your ability is key to being able to get those breakthroughs. Well, it was comical to watch you afterwards, yeah.
Hey, Coach Cohen. In 2017, we moved from Florida all the way up to Connecticut with 3 kids that like to run and 2 that were pretty active. And we called a lot of places, Glastonbury to West Hartford, you name it. We called a lot of school districts, and we said, where do we move if we've got runners in the family? And hands down, even all the way down as Florida, everybody said, well, you want to go to Simsbury. And that's where we ended up. So whether you like it or not, you've got a reputation that extends from here all the way down to Florida. But I'm just wondering if, with that reputation, what would you want to be remembered for and known for in that community if there's only one thing you could pick?
Rarely am I at a loss for words. Let's see. I guess I'd like to be remembered as a good person. Certainly. I would certainly like to be remembered by my athletes as someone who helped them achieve more than they possibly thought was possible beforehand. One of the things that I said in the tape, and by the way, Kevin videoed for like 4.5 hours. So, and then cut things in, so sometimes a lot's missing. But one of the things that did make it onto the tape was this whole idea of why we have sports, in my humble opinion. Teaching to work as a team. Consistency, responsibility. Those are the reasons. And if you learn that, that's the important thing. I mean, I really don't remember from year to year what the team record is. I can tell you, Pete Rodriguez is sitting back there. The three-peat was 92, 93, 94 in cross country. There were other state championships. I can't tell you when those were. Those sorts of things happen when you strive for excellence. And we were just talking before this started. You can't control what other people do. You can only control and be responsible for yourself. So if my athletes do the best job they can and they win, that's great. It's always nice when hard work is rewarded, when consistency and responsibility are rewarded with an external motivation, but it's got to be internal. You can take that same effort, and if 4 Kenyans show up at that race, you're not winning a medal. You're not standing on the medal platform. Can't control it.
So I think you just talked about this, and you talked about it in the video as well, but the idea of coaching the character of young men and women, you know, as a 16-year-old, I thought Dare to Be Great because great things will happen was pretty hokey, but 30 years later, I remember it. So how did, you know, and in teaching, we talk about planning the things you're going to do. How did you plan for those kinds of ideas and build those mantras so that all your athletes know what I'm talking about?
I did a tremendous amount of reading, Pete. I am not a very creative person. You can ask my wife; she's right here. She will tell you. I'm not creative, but I do enough reading. You run into these things. I stole a lot of ideas. I'm not sure how much new actually appears in this world. I think it just recycles. I don't think Dare to Be Great was an actual phrase, but the dare came from something that I read, and greatness is always something to achieve. That's how it happens. It happens from constantly reading, constantly looking at other ideas, and trying to adapt something. Trying to make kids understand that while it's an individual effort when you're out on a trail in a race or in a workout, or you're doing laps on a track, that you're part of something bigger. You know, that this idea of being part of a team should help you exceed whatever it is you think your limits are. And those are the important things to me that kids learn. So try to get those ideas across. I spoke of Mark Aquata. He's
most intelligent decision I ever made as a coach was to call Mike Cohen to come work for us. But to answer the question, I was fortunate to be in attendance at a retirement picnic, I guess, at one of Mike's athletes' homes. And at the end, and I'm meeting all these young men, literally doctors, lawyers, no Indian chiefs, but accomplished young men, gone to some of the finest schools. And at the end, they had a commentary period where young men stood up and gave testimonials about Coach Cohen. And I still remember the overwhelming theme that seemed to come from those young men was that he had prepared them for their future. And when they went on, whether they went on to continue competing or whether it was in the classroom, the preparation that he had given them as a coach, not only as a coach, but as a classroom teacher, made a tremendous difference in their lives. And I always think of the great John Wooden, basketball coach, talking about that that a coach is basically a teacher, and so great coaches are great teachers, and that is Mike Cohen.
Okay, I'll give you a check later.
So I'm a tennis coach in town. I coach a lot of children over at Farmington Valley Racket Club, and I was just curious if you could go back to when you first started coaching and give yourself any piece of advice. What would it be?
Let me back up. I will answer your question. Piece of advice. When I went to work with Mark and Dennis at Granby, and they made me a jumps coach, the little bit that I knew, the little bit that I had picked up in the crash reading I had done, for example, on the long jump, I'm working with this young man. And I said to him, look, your triple jump is basically solid, but your step phase, the second phase of the triple jump, is extremely short. You need to lengthen that out a little bit. The kid did it and did 50 feet the next competition. Now, nobody tells me I'm working with a state champion triple jumper. All right? And I remembered leaving that practice or that meet and said to myself, there's nothing to this coaching gig. You just tell a kid what to do and they do it. It took me a while to learn that I'm not the important thing. And I would probably give myself that advice. You know, no hubris. It's the performance. It's the kid that you're working with. You want that athlete to be successful. And that success is a sliding scale. Yeah, for the state triple jumper, 51 feet is good. All right. If it's a kid who is not blessed with a lot of athletic talent, maybe 20 feet is good. And it took me a while to really learn this idea of you're not coaching to a standard, you're coaching to an individual. That and you're never as good as you think you are. You don't know it. And the classic to this one, and my wife probably doesn't even remember this, but I came home from the state open cross country meet in 1994, higher than a kite because we had won the state open. The last time Simsbury cross country won the state open was 20 years earlier in 1974. And I was pretty sure we were going to win. And I came home and I'm thinking to myself, man, you got it together. You know, you've got this working now. 3 state championships in a row, now a state open championship. And my wife looked at me, she goes, that's fine, take out the garbage. Okay. Do you remember that? Well, thank you. Oh, James, do you have
You covered some of your most memorable triumphs, failures, surprises a little bit in the interview itself. I was just wondering if there were any that didn't quite make the cut that most stick out in your mind.
Yeah, I'll have to say.
It's broad for a reason.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I interviewed him quite a while ago, and he never saw any of the raw footage. So I've been very familiar with it. Like, I've had Cohen in my head for the last year and a half. Like, I don't know, random thing. I don't know.
what?
There's a lot of things. There's a lot of good stuff that like I'd like to share too. I just wanted to make something that was kind of like tight and compact that you could easily share with people and hopefully watch it. You know. I don't know. He elaborated on a lot of the things that he talked about. I like tried to condense it a little bit. There was, I don't know, there was one random interesting thing when you went to the marathon trials. Kind of like random anecdote, but like you talked about the person that had won the marathon trials, the woman that won, and you had known someone and you were able to be at the finish line, and the person that won the marathon trials was from Alaska, and the weather was like adverse on that day, and she had been training on a treadmill inside in like a really humid environment, and so that really helped her, and she was maybe, I think you said
That was in Columbia, South Carolina.
well, lots of random things.
Yeah.
I asked a lot of random questions too, but
I've been fortunate. I've met a lot of really great people in the sport of running. So my ability to associate with a Marcus O'Sullivan, for example, who would come up to camp and be a featured speaker at the camp for 6 years in a row. And the night before camp, we would sit at the director's home, the other director's home up in Vermont, drinking wine and talking about training and all sorts of things. Meeting, some really good college level coaches. A little guy that you may have heard from, I think he coaches at a school, or coached at a school in New Hampshire, Vin Lanana, who then took over coaching at Oregon, coached at Stanford, I think, for a while. Those were all kind of, personal things that were great for me. Hopefully not too many negatives. At least I'm not coming up with any, and maybe that's self-protection. I don't know, James, I'm sorry.
I don't need the microphone, thank you very much. You mentioned, please. You did mention when you retired that you knew it was time, and how the sport had changed from when you started coaching till recently, 7 years ago or whatever. Can you just, how did it change? Was it competition, or maybe you can explain that?
Tell it like it is, baby.
The reason I left coaching in Simsbury was because I had a disagreement with the administration over a student being allowed to stay on the team. And the decision that was being made was in direct opposition to why I coach, this idea of teamwork, this idea of working at effort-based training, so that on an easy day, everybody has an easy day, whether you're a 7-minute miler or a 4-minute miler. When it's a hard day and you're supposed to be working at 90%, it's that 90% of that 4-minute mile versus a 90% of a 7-minute mile. And they didn't see it that way. They saw that this person had a right to be on the team. And it was, for me, simultaneously the hardest and easiest decision to make was to leave. And I felt badly for the team. But if I'm not allowed to coach the team the way I felt it needed to be coached, then they needed to bring somebody else in. That's really what it amounted to. So, yes?
Now you worked with, when you were at the camps, did you work with both like student runners and adult runners? And how did you, if you did, what was your approach? Did you have the same approach to somebody that wants to do a road race or somebody that wants to race?
So the question was about working with people that had different objectives. Let me say that the camp was a high school cross country running camp. So that was pretty limited. We had, however, in that group, those kids who viewed cross country as something to do, with no aspirations of really trying to be competitive. And at the same time having a number of kids who would enroll who were very competitive. We had all-state athletes from the entire East Coast. We had kids who would come in from Texas, Oklahoma. I don't remember anybody from the West Coast. And so we had, any particular week, we might have 15 to 20 different groupings based on ability. The biggest problem with that running camp was kids who came who hadn't done any running. I mean, you're not running anywhere in Vermont in the mountains that you're not running up and down hill. And they were just woefully undertrained when they came in. I don't know why. Not sure why a kid would spend $800 or a parent would spend $800 sending a kid to camp, and they haven't run all summer, but they did. I don't know. Maybe it was a vacation for the parents that week. So, but yeah, Dennis Lobo.
You get a call in July from a high school X and says, we're looking for a cross-country coach, Coach Cohen. Are you interested?
Will it pay the divorce settlement?
You asked her what sex it was? Boys or girls?
No, that wouldn't be, whether I was working with boys, girls, or co-ed, wouldn't be a concern. I think at this point now, I have been retired from actively coaching since 16. All right, so 8 years. I don't think at this point I would go back. If on the other hand, somebody in the area said, hey, we've got a new coach who doesn't know a lot about cross country. Would you come in and, sort of be like a mentor to this person? That's something I would consider. If I got a call and said, we're looking for a javelin coach, 3 days a week. Yeah, maybe. Maybe, if I was just doing single coaching, I know that I would not be taking a head coach track position at this point in my life. So. Yes.
I just wanted to ask, you said there were like 200 kids like on a team at some point. How did you coach differently the kids who were really passionate and like really wanted to run, or the kids that maybe were just doing it because their parents wanted them to do it, or they were doing it with their friends? Like, how did you treat them differently?
First of all, understand that was the track situation. I think on cross country, I only coached the boys technically, worked with some of the girls, but only coached the single sex. And cross country teams since the early 90s, I don't think we ever had less than 40. Of those 40, remember, I coached by this idea of effort-based training. I have notebooks that have pages of paces based on trials that we would do. My runners would come in, distance runners. This would also work for track, but distance runners would come in. We would do a 1.5 mile time trial on the track. Technically, Mr. Ives will tell you it should be a 2-mile time trial, but I could never get young kids to give me an all-out 2-mile effort. They gave me maybe 6 out of 8 laps. So we would do a 1.5 mile time trial, and then that established what theoretically, according to exercise physiologists, gives you your VVO2, velocity at VO2 max, which equates to 95 to 97% effort. From that, I can tell you if it's a 70% day, just go to the chart. You run a 632 VVO2. You look that up. You go across to the 70% column. That's your pace. Now, what I'm trying to teach them is this is what 70% should feel like. Because you get into a race, you don't want to feel like you're running 70%. You want to feel like you're running 90% or critical velocity racing. All right, depending upon the length again. So that's the way with distance runners we handled effort. We handled differences. People who jump, people who throw, you can throw a discus easily. You can throw a shot put easily and just work on technique. All right. You can jump easily and work through your approach. Hard run up and then just not really go through with a full jump. But when you're jumping hard, you're just going to jump further. That's the way you would deal with it. All I want is, when we're serious, we're serious. Now, the only event in which I really tried to cut down as much of the kind of kidding around and fooling around is pole vault. Because you run down a runway, 10 things can happen and 9 of them are not good. So pole vault was, I needed a more serious attitude. You're going in the air, you're doing what's expected of you. So, doesn't mean they didn't laugh a lot. They just didn't laugh when they're running down the runway. Thank you.
I just want to say one last thing. There's no one else I would have rather done this project with and interviewed Coach. I think he's incredibly deserving of it too. So I'm very glad that you guys were able to watch it. And Cohen was gracious enough to bring some refreshments. And then also I made a little display of books that he recommended. And then also there's little printouts of like sort of things that he would give to us or email to us while we were on his team. So thank you all for coming.
Where can we find the video?
Okay, so I haven't posted it publicly yet, but I will be posting it on my website. And my website is kwjordan.com. But if anyone wants to give me their contact information, I can email it or text it to them too. It also will be on SCTV because they're recording it, and that will include the Q&A portion too. Yeah.
One last thing.
I don't know. Yeah, copy it.
Just one last thing, and I didn't have an opportunity really to say this, and I should. I was extremely fortunate to have a family that understood and allowed me to coach for 35 years. Not always in the moment, but my wife went to a number of family events, stag, because we had Wickham Park. She went to weddings of friends. You plan it on Wickham, I'm not going to be there. I'm going to be at Wickham Park until 4:30, 5 o'clock. So at any rate, I just did want to make that point that I could not have done this the way I did it for the length of time I did it had it not been for her understanding.
For over 40 years, SCM has been the voice of our town,
bringing us together through local programming,
education, and live broadcasts.
SCM isn't just about television.
It's about empowering our community,
ensuring our voices are heard during government meetings,
and celebrating milestones
like our high school graduations.
But today, SCM faces a challenge.
Our funding structure is based on television subscriptions.
And it's no secret, people have been cutting the cord.
With a shift to internet-only subscriptions,
SCM receives less revenue,
even though all our programming is freely available online.
We need your support.
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 Your donation can make a difference.
It will ensure that SCM remains open,
continues to educate our youth,
and keeps our community informed.
Thanks to SCM, I've been honing my creative skills, helping me work towards my college degree.
SCM is crucial for keeping our community connected.
SCM isn't just here to broadcast local events. They're actually preserving Simsbury's history.
Join us in preserving Simsbury's voice.
Simsbury's voice.
Together we can ensure that SCM continues to thrive
for generations to come.
Visit our website
or scan the QR code on your screen.